Sanvanani Dumelang, good evening and welcome to the Monday edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama. It's episode 195 of the Private Property Podcast. And if you're joining us for the first time, well, you've missed out on quite a lot of great content that we have brought to your screens. So do make sure that you go back to some of our old episodes on Facebook as well as on YouTube to catch up on all the great episodes that we have had so far. And to all our regular viewers, welcome back. You know how we do it every single weekday. Hot property topics and help each other along our property journey. Whether you're renting out, you're a landlord, you're on the market to buy a new property, sell a property, looking at growing your property portfolio, making sure that you want to know everything that you'd like to know in order to best position yourself to make the best property decision. Well, this show certainly is for you. Well, it's a Monday edition. We're certainly going to have great episodes in the coming weeks. And as usual, it's never just a private property podcast with myself, Zama, but we also have other amazing shows across our social media platforms. I am talking about the Farming Podcast with Umbali Noko, which comes to your screens every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. So if you know that you've got those green fingers, then do make sure that you watch that show. It will help you along your decisions when it comes to all things agriculture. And then on Wednesdays, Esty Claassen brings you the First Time Home Buyers Show at 8 p.m., where she gets to talk to people who've walked that journey. She explores some of the mistakes that they did, some of the mistakes that they made, but also the things that they got right. Because we want to make sure that we save you time and money on your property journey. And over the weekend, Chad brings you the Home Shoppers Show, where he gets to profile some of the best estates and complexes that the country has on offer. So you certainly have a lot on your plate that you can pick from across our social media platforms. And of course, on your TV screens, you can tune into Mzansi Cribs Makeover that comes to your screens every single Thursdays at 9:30, where Utatomba brings you that show, and it's got the repeats on Saturday and on Sunday. So we always have a lot of property content that you can chew on and get to enjoy, but also we're on your social media platforms, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can also follow myself on @Zamantunga_K on Instagram as well as Twitter. Love talking property and helping each other along on our property journey. Now, talking about it, helping each other along on our property journey, that's exactly what we're going to be doing this evening. You know that on Friday we spoke to Mike Addison. We were talking about insurance in the community schemes and really had a good understanding of how insurance in community schemes effectively works. And he did, give a hint, and we did give a hint that we're also going to be talking about insurance this evening, and we're going to be talking about understanding the anatomy of a property insurance claim. Because I'm sure many of us, I was actually saying to my guest of air, we were saying that more often than not, you'll find that a property owner will maybe deal with an insurance claim once in their lifetime. I said, listen, I've actually done quite a few of these, and it may be because it's managing multiple properties as opposed to one. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why. And this is something that you want to get a handle on because it can be quite intimidating. A lot of paperwork, sometimes you're not sure how you explain what is wrong. I mean, they often want you to explain, okay, what exactly is wrong, what's happened, and all these kinds of things. So we're going to be exploring the anatomy of a claim when it comes to your property insurance claim. We're going to be looking also at what happens when, there's a rejection. More often than not, there are essentially three reasons why there'd be a rejection. We're going to explore, the three kind of brackets that a rejection is going to fall under. We're also going to look at, what happens if you want to complain about your insurance claim. Perhaps the insurance company you're dealing with is not treating you particularly well and you're not getting a lot of joy with them. I know a lot of us sometimes tend to be on that boat where you struggle with the broker that you're dealing with. So how do you then make sure that you complain? Who do you complain to? How do you go about complaining? And really helping us best make sure that when we do have that insurance claim, we end up having, a payout and a smooth journey. And I think that's one of the things that we want to explore this evening. I want to hear from you at home, if you've ever had to make a property insurance claim, what were you claiming for and what was your experience, as we explore this topic this evening. And before we get into it, it is Monday, meaning we've got a new clue for our Sherlock Holmes competition. And of course, that new clue for our Sherlock Holmes competition is just inland from the mother city in a student town that grows wine. You'll find 3 rooms to play in a secure estate that's Valgan Fedden. I actually already know where this one is. I'm not gonna give it away, but that is riddle number 4 of our Sherlock Holmes competition. And of course, for our Sherlock Holmes competition, you stand a chance of walking away with 5,000 Rand voucher every single Friday for the next 12 weeks. We are in the 4th week, and on Wednesdays and Thursdays, we do a 500 Rand spot prize. So enter as many times as you'd like. Get your friends and family to enter as many times as they like. They need to be watching us live, because in order for you to claim the spot prize on Wednesdays and Thursdays, you need to be watching us live. It is that easy to win across our private property social media platforms, especially right here on the Private Property Podcast. Well, to get us started with our Monday conversation, I am joined by Douglas Haig, who's the MD of CIA Building Insurance. Douglas, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Zama. Thanks. It's great to be here. And welcome to all the listeners.
You know, Doug, I was saying to you earlier off air that insurance people, I'm one of those people that always I always think twice when I have to deal with insurance people, because there's a sentiment that I sometimes hold that, look, they're always after your money, you pay your insurance on time, that debit order never bounces, and by the time it's time to have, an insurance claim, then there's an issue. And I'm sure there's so many people at home who've probably have that sentiment, even though they've never had a bad experience with an insurance company. But I think so many of us hold the sense that, look, insurance is a bit of a scam, and we just pay it because you want to be able to sleep a bit easy at home. But of course, this evening we want to better understand the anatomy of an insurance claim, because it is one of those things that as homeowners, as we're saying off air, you may have to deal with at least once in your lifetime, and you want to best understand, what actually goes into a claim, what's the process of this claim. So almost take us from, the top of, there's something that happens at home and I need to lodge a claim. What would be the steps, or how would that process essentially look like?
Okay, cool. Thanks, Zama. I must just say, before we get into that, you did open the door a little bit. The importance of insurance, and I just want to say this. Remember, as a property investor, you face many risks, and some of the risks you can manage in different ways. For example, a tenant, you can have a credit agreement, and you can have lawyers helping you find or drawing up the correct agreements and vetting your tenants. One of the risks that you face as a property owner is the destruction of your property. And that's the one risk that insurance has been really designed and really works wonderfully to protect you against. And that's what I was saying to you earlier, is that, insurance bad things can happen to all of us at any time and indiscriminately, but being able to recover from a bad experience like the destruction of your property, that's where insurance comes into its own. And I think that's the problem. As in an industry, we sell trust, we sell promises, and that's a tough game, because it's easy to take advantage of people when that's what you're doing. So I suppose, yes, the idea tonight is just to give you a bit of a background into an insurance claim and try and make it less daunting when you have to deal with insurance, to try and give you a bit of an insider's view on insurance claim and how it would flow. So I thought the first thing, I'll just say this about an insurance claim, and it's easy to say it, but really it is important, is be prepared. Now, what does that mean? For property, I just wanted to mention 4 quick things. Being prepared in the home, one thing would be having a fire extinguisher. For 150 Rand, you have the ability to stop a fire before it gets out of hand. You're not always going to be able to use it, but it's definitely worth having for the low cost. Very importantly, know where the water switch is, or the water tap, to cut off the water to your property. So sometimes it might be outside the kitchen door, other times it's out in the garden. Know where that valve is, because trust me, at least once or twice you're going to have a problem that you need to get the water cut off quickly. And knowing where that is going to help and save a lot of damage. The other thing, also in the same vein, know where to switch off your electricity, know where to switch off gas. And then lastly, have on your cupboard or on your fridge or somewhere just a list of emergency numbers. It really, when a claim or when something bad happens, just knowing who to call can take a few seconds, and knowing that you've got a list up there with the numbers ready at hand can make a lot of difference, that you're not searching for numbers and the like. So that's now being prepared. But when a claim happens or when something happens, the first thing I always tell people is don't panic. And that's I know it's a bit obvious, but it's something that you've got to almost mentally prepare yourself for, that there's a lot you can do in any situation, and you mustn't underestimate your ability to handle situations. So for example, if there's a fire, try and put it out. Don't just drop everything and run out the house. You should do that as well if you're not successful in putting it out. But often you can put out a fire. If your house is flooding, pick up items off the floor, put them on the tables. If you can put towels under the doors to stop it, do that. There's a lot you can do from that perspective to almost make a bad situation or contain a bad situation. But often you can't, and we've seen it. We've seen a tornado come through Krugersdorp that takes the roofs clean off of an apartment block, that throws cars in the air. And in a situation like that, the best thing is you have to be safe. But then the question is, okay, then what happens now after that? So there's a fire and your house burns down, or there's a tornado and your roof is blown off. What do you do exactly at that point? And this is where it's difficult I can't explain every situation, but I just wanted to show from an insurance perspective how we would view it. And the first thing would be to keep yourself and your loved ones, get them to safety and be safe. And if that means running away and leaving everything as it is, then you do that. The second thing would be to try and, where possible, mitigate further loss. And that would be something like, if your window has been blown out and there's rain coming in, you try and close it up with a bag or something, a plastic bag. Obvious things. The next thing that we do is take photos and take videos. That's very easy these days. Keep a video record. If there's a massive storm, it always helps. If the water's coming through the walls, take a video. It's really, it will always help you later on in the process. Take photos. If there's items that have been damaged, don't just throw them out and get rid of them. Put them to one side. That's, again, it's going to be useful down the line if you do encounter a problem. So those are like the pre-insurance claim steps, and then you get to this point where you realize, okay, now I have to lodge an insurance claim, and it's the next day, and you're sitting and where do I go start? So the first thing would be to say, if you're in a body corporate or in a community scheme, there will generally be a process that the community scheme has decided to follow, and it may be, you phone the trustee, or you phone the managing agent, or you phone the broker, or you send them an email. So my advice would be, if there's a process, follow the process. It generally results in a quicker and more streamlined settling of the claim. However, if you're not getting joy in the process, you're always welcome to, you're entitled to contact the insurance company yourself directly and say, I need your assistance. I've had calls on my cell phone from a guy saying, I need to claim. I don't know who to phone, but I know I'm insured with you. and I need to put in a claim today. And we help people like that. So yeah, it's good to follow the process if you can. The next thing is, yes, keep photos, keep video evidence. Normally you have to fill in an insurance claim form. Now that is a bit of admin, but it's important for there to be it's a record of what happened, and also a record that you as the owner of the property are claiming against the insurance. So there is a legal reason that we have a claim form, and you don't always need a claim form. There are certain times where we don't have a claim form, but generally, if you're submitting a claim after something has happened, you'd fill in a claim form and sign it and send it in. So that's building up to a claim. Okay, I think maybe it would be worthwhile then just touching on the 3 reasons why a claim wouldn't be entertained, and what could be the reason that your claim is not paid out. And this is important because if your expectation is correct, you'll have a better experience. So in our world is the property insurance world. So it's different, obviously, to cars and to TVs and electronics insurance and your cell phone insurance. This is really property insurance. But in our world, there's really only 3 main reasons why an insurance claim wouldn't be valid. And the first and most important one, and you guys touched on this on Friday, Zama, was something that happens gradually over time.
Yeah.
So anything that's been happening over time will almost always be excluded from cover. The only exception to that rule is your geyser. And your geyser is because what's happening in your geyser, it's rusting slowly but surely, and at some point over maybe after 5 or 6 years, it leaks, it springs a leak, and that is due to rust, and that's been happening over time. And that's covered. But all other things that happen to your property, if it's been happening over time, for example, mold or a crack, that's starting to crack and the paint is starting to chip off, these things are not insurance claims. They'd be maintenance type claims. And that's part of the maintenance of a property. The other big reasons, and the reason number 2 that a claim would often be rejected, is because of defective workmanship. So this is also quite a difficult one, because if something is installed or built and it's not built to the correct standard, the likelihood of it falling over or collapsing or being damaged is almost certain, or very high, compared to if it was installed according to the correct standards and procedures. So you guys would know this in the property world, you've got building regulations.
Yeah.
And these regulations are there exactly for this purpose, because a brick wall, if it's not a certain thickness and it's built too high, it will fall over. Whether it's a child pushing it over, or some water pushing it, or a strong wind, a wall that's not built correctly will fall over at some point. And that would be a good example of a claim that wouldn't be valid, because if it's not built correctly to start with, it's not going to, if it fails, it's not going to be a fortuitous event, which is an event that no one could predict.
Yeah.
So that's quite important. It's a difficult one because sometimes you don't know, and that's the challenge. They didn't know that the wall, and the challenge is insurance to be sustainable and to be effective. It has to be based on a baseline of standards. So it's got to assume a base of, because the pricing of insurance is based on the probability that something will happen. So that the probability that a tornado will tear through Krugersdorp, uprooting everything in its path, there's a mathematical probability for that, and the actuaries that work to price insurance, they take that into account. But if you now have a wall that's not built correctly, the chance that it will fall over is almost 100%, meaning that the insurance premium that you're going to have to pay to insure that wall is going to be the 100%. Yeah, much higher, and that's the challenge with it. But luckily, in especially in South Africa and the new property legislation, defective workmanship. Firstly, you have recourse against the contractor. You have recourse against the previous owner of the building if he sold you something knowingly that was faulty. And you also have the NHBRC, which also steps in at a certain stage. So that does help with a lot of these type of things. The other thing that's just important to remember with defective workmanship is that it had to be material to the loss. So be careful. It's like the smooth tires. If your car gets stolen but your tires were smooth, it's not fair for your insurer to reject your claim. In a similar way, if your house burns down and one of the walls wasn't built thickness, you can't reject the claim because of that. It has to be material to the loss. So it's important to remember that. And then the last thing, just to specify the last bucket that a rejected claim would usually fall into, is where there's a specific exclusion or specific item that's not included per the policy. So some policies will exclude any damage by monkeys. That would be, and then that's just the condition of that policy. And this is where an insurance broker, and I mean, you had a great chat to Mike Addison from Adsure, who are insurance brokers that specialize in sectional title. And this is where the value of a good broker comes in, because a good broker will explain to you that in terms of this policy, these are the things that would be excluded. And they would tell you that up front so that you know about it. And that then when you do claim, they would also just remind you and say, yeah, but remember, that event is not covered. Mm-hmm. That also helps to reduce the confusion and the difficulty with it. So that's pretty much the three.
And it's such an important, Douglas, I think it's such an important three things to note, right? So it's, to our viewers at home, we are talking about understanding the anatomy of property insurance claims. And Douglas has taken us through a very great breakdown of the, three exclusions, where your claim is essentially just going to get rejected if it falls under these three things. So you want to make sure that it doesn't fall under these three. The first one is in the event where the thing that you want to claim on has been happening gradually over time. And we spoke quite at length about it last week, Friday, with Mike Addison, around how, if, let's say, it's a leak in your pipe and it's been leaking over an extended period of time, that's different from when there's a pipe burst. So then the pipe burst would be covered, whereas if it's a leak over a period of time, that is because, maintenance is essentially needed. The second one is defective workmanship. And we always emphasize this one. You want to make sure that you're working with trusted contractors, accredited contractors, because in the event where something wrong happens, you're able to, there are proper channels essentially that you can follow to make sure that you hold them accountable for the poor workmanship. And that last one is in the event where there's a specific exclusion as per the policy that you are that you've essentially taken up. So those are the three reasons why. I did, of course, ask you earlier at home. I definitely want to hear from you in the event where you've had a property insurance claim. What was the experience like, and perhaps what was the thing you were claiming for? Now, I was saying earlier, I've had quite a few property insurance claims. All of them went relatively okay. I think there was one that was particularly stressful, and there was a lot of back and forth. Ultimately, there was a payout as opposed to them fixing and paying the contractors themselves. Whereas in previous times, they got in the contractors and the contractors did the work and insurance paid them directly. And I think for me, the biggest thing is probably the admin of it all. I know that, and at home, I always confess, I very terrible with admin and almost trying to avoid it like the plague. But I certainly want to hear from you. I see you've got a comment here from Umata Shingange, who says, I was so impressed the one time I had a claim with my insurance and they only needed a picture. There was no paperwork needed. Which is fantastic. It's what Douglas was saying earlier, that sometimes there are some claims where you won't need paperwork, but for the most part, they will, and it's because of the nature of how they do business in insurance. So then, Doug, now we understand the things that definitely do not, that insurance typically wouldn't cover. We have a good sense of that. And we also have a really good sense of what to do in the event where something happens. Because I think you did such a nice breakdown of what we can do now as we're living in our respective homes. There's nothing that's happened. And then obviously in the event of an emergency, certain active steps that you can take in that moment. I particularly like the tip around knowing where various switches are, because in the event where there is that, burst pipe in your house, knowing where you can just switch off the water supply helps quite significantly, because it's a difference between more water flooding up more space and potentially like going higher, meaning that, more of your property gets exposed to water. Even knowing where, electric switches are and those kinds of things becomes very important. And I know that sometimes when you live in a community scheme, you don't know these things. You're able to quickly call security. They would know. But for those of you, of course, who live in your own freestanding homes, it's so important to just know where to quickly rush off to switch off, whether it's water and electricity, in the event where something happens. And of course, make sure that your family is safe as you're attending, of course, to the particular emergency. So then in the event, Doug, where you're dealing with an insurance broker or an insurance company and you're not getting any joy, because as much as Martha and myself have had great experiences, I know that there are also people who sometimes don't get a lot of joy. They've filled in the paperwork, they've submitted the pictures and the videos, but they still aren't winning in terms of their insurance claim. What are some of the steps that viewers at home can sort of actively take to make sure that they're essentially attended to?
Okay, yeah, it's so. Unfortunately, it does happen that, and there are two types of disputes that you can have, or two types of problems that you can have. The one is that you're not getting feedback, or you're waiting too long. Okay, and that the best way to deal with that. Let me just explain. Obviously, you've got a broker and your broker, remember, is your appointed agent. So even if you're living in a body corporate, the broker is being paid by the body corporate to act on behalf. So the broker has a big responsibility, and that's where a good broker will shine, is with claims, is that they will actively chase up and know who to speak to, and come and see the person if they need to, and get quite involved. Person that will be involved in your claim will be someone often called a loss adjuster or claims assessor. Now, this is a person who's appointed by the insurance company, usually as an independent party, that comes and views the damage and assesses it. They'll be responsible for sourcing quotes often. If you need an engineer, they'll generally be the one to enlist the services of an engineer or an architect. So this person is a loss adjuster, but once the claim starts moving along, he almost becomes a project manager. And especially in the case where the insurer will appoint a contractor to do the work, the loss adjuster will be there. He will be there to monitor the work and make sure that it's happening according to the right standard. So complaining, following up with the broker is your first port of call, then following up with the loss adjuster. If you don't come right there, get in touch, and it's also a good practice generally, once you've registered your claim, find out who is the claims handler at the insurance company. And it's important to know the name of the person and the telephone number and get the email address, because then again, in a situation where you're not getting feedback, you can contact them directly, and often that's the quickest way to getting an answer. Now, you could have a situation where you've submitted all the documents, everything is fine, and you get an email back and saying, sorry, or a rejection letter saying, we're not going to pay your claim. Mm-hmm. What do you do? And this can be, and I think, this can be a scary experience, and I want to I want to just kind of give some tips on how you can handle that and hopefully resolve it in the fairest way possible. So the first point of call, you've received a letter, rejection letter. What do? You reply to the broker or to whoever sent you the letter. First, obviously, read the letter and check the reasons and make sure that in terms of the law, the insurer is obliged to give you detailed reasons for why the rejection has been or the claim has been rejected. So make sure that those points and why you disagree with them, because that would be your first point, is just to go back to the person sending it to you and say, please, I do not agree with this decision. I would like it to be reviewed by management or by senior management, and give the specific reasons. This is why I don't believe what you've said is correct. That will then generally go back, and I know at CIA, for example, we have a 4-stage process where there's 4 times that you can go back, and through the process. So once you've asked for a review, then you will get what's called, if it's still being rejected, you'll get what's called an uphold rejection letter. And this is where what they should have done is they've reviewed it, managers looked at it again and decided based on the facts no. At this point, I would generally advise, ask for whatever reports that the insurance company has got. So if they've appointed a loss adjuster, ask them, can I have a copy of the loss adjuster's report? Or can I have a copy of the engineer's report? Can I please see it? I feel quite strongly that insurance companies should be transparent with that type of information, because it's, at the end of the day, a lot of the rejection shouldn't be based on a whim. It should be based on facts, and those facts would be recorded in a report. So that's a good way. And then once you've reviewed that, get hold of that, and once you've reviewed that, that's when I'd then submit a formal complaint. Something which is also a good tip to remember is that most financial institutions, and definitely almost all insurers, will have a complaints department. And the complaints department will be separate from most other departments.
Yeah.
And it's the same in the banks, and the same with the life insurance. And it's a very handy, because I just think about our complaints department is we want them to be dependent. We don't want them just to, whatever's happened in the claims department, for them just to repeat. We need them to think independently and say, let me just look at all the evidence from start, and let me just see what is the pros and the cons. So sending an email to the complaints department is a very good step. And again, just try and set out your reasons. If you have, if you've had often you might, if it's serious enough, you might consider getting your own engineer or your own contractor to give you a report saying. It does happen. I've had cases where there are 2 engineers and they have differing opinions, and you'd think that they're both proper professional engineers. They're both looking at the same circumstance. How can they have different opinions? But it does. And so you want to present that information to the insurer and just say, listen, what the insurers should then do, and what they normally will do, is they'll say, okay, we've got 2 opinions. Let's have the 2 opinions talk to each other and find out. And we've done that often, where we have 2 engineers that will have differing opinions, and between them they'll decide, yes, this is the right approach. You see, so the key there is transparency and fairness. And obviously, always, where there's doubt, the benefit should go to the client. That's just you can insist on that. If it's a 50-50 decision, then it should go in favor of the client. That's just the way we like to see things. But most good insurers have that philosophy. The last thing then, in the complaint, you should get a proper response. And in the complaint, the response will tell you, listen, these are the next steps. And, for example, in our complaint letter, they put in my email address. And it's just something that even if it all went wrong and you're still not happy, send me an email and let me at least look at it and try and see if there's anything we've missed. Anywhere through the process, you can approach the ombud, and this is a really good safeguard in the industry, and it's something that you can take a lot of comfort in. Is that the ombud is a service to insureds, and it's designed to make a fair adjudication of claims. You can approach them. They'll then assess the facts. They'll come back to you, and the decision that they make is not binding on you, but it is binding on the insurer. So if they say, CIA, you must pay this, we have to pay. However, if they say, CIA, you don't have to pay this, and you still feel strongly, you can still approach the courts and pursue a legal action. And so the decision of the ombud is not binding on you. So it's a good something to have. Look, unfortunately, it is a bit more admin, and you don't want to necessarily go through the process unless you're very sure and certain of your facts.
And I think it's probably also just one of those things that sometimes you think, there've been so many back and forths, that you probably want to throw in the towel. I know that a lot of people tend to not want to approach any ombud. Doesn't matter whether it's insurance or whatever issue that they currently have at the moment. Before we round up, I'm going to read one last comment from YouTube. This one is coming from Bukhala Kobe, who says, I remember my uncle had difficulty claiming with his insurance after the neighbor's child had bumped their car into the wall. And I know that that's also one of those issues that we tend to typically have, with kids playing around with the cars, and then there's damage to vehicles and other people's properties, whether it's a wall or sometimes even driving all the way into the house itself. I've certainly had I've heard a lot of those kinds of stories that do tend to be quite tricky when you want to do an insurance claim. Also trying to establish whether people have third-party insurance, how it should be working, and those kinds of things. And unfortunately, sometimes you find that some parties don't have insurance, and so it just becomes quite a big issue altogether. But Douglas, before I let you go, any final tip for our homeowners at home when it comes to making sure that they have the smoothest journey when they're dealing with their property insurance claims? I mean, I'm even wondering right now in Joburg, we've had rains for the past 2 weeks. I'm sure there are people who probably had some kind of water damage. We've seen even in other parts of the country prior to these rains was the Cyclone Eloise and the damage in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, and all those kinds of things. We've really seen damage to property because of weather almost across many parts of the country. What final tip would you give to our viewers at home in order to ensure that they have, we'll say, the smoothest journey possible? Because once you have been hit by a crisis like that, especially when it's weather related, right? Because I mean, we've been having rain. I think today was like the first day of seeing sun after 2 weeks straight of not seeing it at all. So many things are happening. Sometimes the last thing you think about is insurance. Maybe only now you'll start thinking about insurance. Sometimes the damage is so big that some of your documents are also damaged, and there's just quite a lot that's happening. So any final tip for our viewers at home when it comes to those kinds of things?
I think when it comes to definitely at a time like now, things will get busy, and this is why insurance is there, and it's so you mustn't ever feel that you don't be put off by the process or thing. That's the first thing is, if you've paid your insurance and you believe you've got a valid claim, then pursue it. Sometimes the information is difficult. You might get conflicting reports. An insurer or an assessor will take photos and that shows old damage, and then there's new damage. And so sometimes it's not always simple. The claims can be complex, and then you need to have patience with it. The biggest thing I'd say from making your insurance journey plain sailing or smooth sailing is have a good broker. Really, brokers that they take a cut of the commission or the cut of the premium, but that's regulated in terms of the law. So you're not paying one broker more than another. So for the same amount of money, you can have a really good broker. And a really good broker, is someone that will help you out on a Saturday night. You can phone him. You've got his number. And I just think, and he's the person that his whole job is to manage the stress and the complexity that goes along with insurance, and that to try and keep it as smooth as possible. So there's really a lot of value, and he understands all the terminology. He's expected to know all the exclusions, all the fine print, anything that's different about your policy than the normal policy. He should know it, and having a good broker that will tell you that and keep you up to date, that for me is, and we see it in our clients. The good brokers, have the happiest client experiences, and they fight for their clients. I mean, really, having a broker that fights for you is he's worth more than his weight in gold. Really, it's a good thing.
And that's quite a great place to leave it there, Douglas. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Zama. Have a good evening.
And that is Douglas Haig, who is the MD of CIA Building Insurance. I do hope that for many of you at home, you're going to make sure that you've got the right broker. If you live in a community scheme, then you also want to find out if the broker that the community scheme is using is a good broker, because you also want them to be able to advocate for you. I know that in the many experiences that I've had, the good thing that I can say is the brokers have actually been really good. So in as much as it's been very admin intensive, lots of back and forth, I can, without doubt say that the brokers that I've dealt with along the journey were quite good and did give me a good experience. And if anything, they were fighting for me with the insurer on the other end. And that's why I got all the payouts, even though there was quite a bit of admin along the way. Well, that's it from me, Zamantungwa Khumalo, and the rest of the Private Property Podcast team here on Monday evening. We are, of course, back on your screens tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
Hi, I'm Brian Kepper. I'm a 10-time South African motorcycling champion. My family and I have chosen to live in Fourways. There's some really great suburbs in our neighborhood. There's a lot of families living in the surrounding areas, in places like Lone Hill and Cedar Lakes. What draws people to Cedar Lakes is that it's so close to Broadacre Shopping Centre, Cedar Square and Fourways Life Hospital. Lone Hill is a major draw card for many families. It's got some great smaller commercial centres and some fantastic schools like Crawford College. From an entertainment point of view, Monte Casino really comes alive at night. There's so much on the go and there's an incredible energy in the area. Our family just loves the fast-paced lifestyle that Fourways brings. But honestly, the thing that attracted us most to this area was the active lifestyle that it offers. As a family, we've chosen to live in Fourways because of the lifestyle and convenience, and this is our neighborhood.